is 11 o'clock Mountain Time. We will get started. There will be people, I'm sure, joining a little bit later. And yeah, I'm excited for everyone to be here. We have everyone on mute right now, and I think that's the way we're going to roll through this. If you have a question or would like to comment, please put in the chat. I'm going to do my best to get to every single question. Uh, Probably not here, but eventually. And then if you do have a question, put in the chat with along with your email, and that'll make it easy for me to get back to you if you want me to respond to you. But today's topic, today's Ask Alive is bridging the gap, developing age group technique for elite success, which is obviously a huge topic and so much to cover. And this Ask Alive is brought to you by our sponsor, Councilman Hunsaker. Very much appreciate them and their support of ASCA through all these years. And without further ado, we'll get into it. And yeah, so essentially, yeah, developing age group technique for insert any level of success. It really is, you could put anything, whether it's future success, college success, high school success, long-term success. And that's where we're trying to go for when we're talking about age group technique. And I would just want to start by saying that the technique models or the goal technique for each stroke are more clear than ever. And by that, I mean that what the best swimmers are doing at every single level are just converging on what I would consider to be the technique models for every aspect of every stroke. So yeah, there used to be so much more variation uh, in what people do and what we see, but when I watch video, it's yeah, the best age groupers, the best national level, junior national level, international. Uh, it is just more it's more narrow of a band of what technique is succeeding. And so we have to be moving closer and closer and teaching closer and closer to that and being more and more specific about what that is. So, I understand that age group coaches, there's definitely obviously concessions that we have to make with little kids. They don't have a great core. They might not have great strength. They might not have great awareness of their body. And so what you're doing is you're teaching movement patterns. You're trying to get young athletes familiar with movements. You're getting them to do things more or exaggerating things. But I do think that, and that's great. But I would say that you, as an age group coach, still need to know what the end goal technique is and how your teaching and direction fits into that. And yeah, so yeah, even if the senior athlete is able to do such and such, I mean you're you're obviously doing and teaching all like full strokes. So, while the focus might be on, I think, specific key foundations of the stroke, I think your understanding and everyone's understanding needs to be on the same page. So, yeah, essentially long-term success. And I would say staff alignment is critical for athlete development and technical development. And what that means is, your strategy, communication, and shared vision in terms of philosophy, just general team and coaching philosophy, your training progression, but then also for sure, this is what I'm going to be talking about is technical development. So, yeah, your age group coaches and your swim school, your age group coaches, your, middle groups, and then your senior groups all need to be on the same page as to, if you're not teaching the same thing, which you shouldn't be teaching the same things because of what athletes are capable of doing. Um, just when those aspects, what about each aspect is going to be taught at each different level, I think is the important aspect of what you're trying to be covering. So, I made this and I don't know, obviously this is my opinion. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I see, what athletes are capable of in terms of development. We're going to revisit this at the end. So, and you're also going to get these slides. So don't feel like you have to write everything down or take a screenshot of everything, but the slides are available and will be available very shortly after this. And basically my perspective on what is capable and what should be the focus points when you're moving through different ages and different groups. So yeah, for 10 unders, let's say 8 unders, 9 10s, obviously I'm broadly grouping these groups together. But yeah, just broadly, you're doing so much teaching. you're getting athletes familiar with movement patterns, and then yeah, a lot of air exchange and being comfortable, developing that comfort in air exchange. Not even breathing technique, but just yeah, comfort of mouth in the water and breathing while water splashing all around you. So important. I would say yes, you're doing full strokes, at at times, but I would say the important things to dial in are kicking, not just kicking reps, but kicking mechanics, the catch and appropriate rotation. I do think, which doesn't mean that you only have to do appropriate rotation. You can over rotate, you can exaggerate, etc. But these, to me, for each stroke, are the most important aspects that should be the foundation of every single stroke and should be the foundation of development and should be, yeah, the goal of trying to dial these positions in. And then with an understanding of snorkel usage, I've seen multiple groups now of teams with very good success, where their 8 and under groups are using snorkels. And there's some people that look at me when I mention that and yeah, just think that that's wildly impossible. But like I said, I've seen groups have that and use 8 and unders use snorkels very comfortably. I think it's great. I mean, obviously, um, I mean, little kids, giant thoughts compared to their smaller bodies. And so, yeah, breathing is such an obstacle and a roadblock to, yeah, just having these previous three things, kicking, catch, and appropriate rotation dialed in. And so, yeah, when a kid turns their head so much for a freestyle breath, how much that catch is compromised, how much the kick cuts out, or how much they over rotate. So all those things with a breath. So, yeah, just developing or introducing snorkels at the very minimum, if you're not able to get them super comfortable doing it. But I do think introduction of it is great. And yeah, and with an understanding that little kids have minimal core, so that there are definitely some concessions that are made for the end goal stroke. And that, like I said, with the large head, relatively, it's going to dictate a lot of the movement for little kids. So understanding that there are some concessions with that too. So to me, the key critical age groups are this 11, 12, 13, 14 group. And that to me is when we should be aiming for athletes to have the technique models and or to be as close as possible to the technique models. I'm not saying it's perfect, but you're trying to have, I would say, yeah, everything, try to dial in everything as much as possible. Everything I've seen with our elite athletes, whenever the when I see their old video from when they're, let's say, 13, 14, their technique is basically the same from 13, 14 up until they're on the Olympic podium. So yeah, we're talking that a lot of these movement patterns are dialed in and are cemented at from this 11, 12, 13, 14 age. In my travels now, going the opposite direction, I would say that I've seen many athletes at this 11, 12, 13 age, 11 through 13 age, that have amazing technique, what I would consider model technique. Does that mean they're the fastest of all time? No, it just means that their movement patterns are really good. Obviously, there's so much more that goes into having great results in a race, but just having yeah, just trying to dial in these technique models at this age. So everything 8 and under, so kick and catch, appropriate rotation, and then also adding on, I would say the nuances of the pull and the finish. And to me, the finish, yeah, like I said, we're gonna be doing your 10 unders are gonna be doing full stroke, but to me, the nuances of the finish are very specific and should be something that we're really focusing in on more at the 11 through 14 range. Breathing mechanics and breath timing, breaststroke kick mechanics, and the fly press, I would say with minimal head driving. So yeah, 10 and under, just to go into a little bit more of that, is a 10 under. They're going to be throwing their head way more on a fly press. And yeah, from 11 to 14, being more specific and getting that press less from the head going way down and more from connecting the head to the body and then pressing the body forward. So, yeah, with this 11 through 14 range, you have athletes that are developing their core more. So, being able to have their head connected to their body in their movement. Their body is obviously growing into, th kind of proportionally with their head a little bit more. And so I think you're able to dial in the breathing mechanics too. Is it possible, going back to the 10 unders, is it possible? I've often wondered if it's possible for a 10 under to have the perfect breath. And I just don't really think so. So, yeah, just dialing in these details, important details from 11 to 14, and then really 15 and up your senior groups, it's fine tuning with some continued development. It is just a lot of tweaking. And sure, there's definitely athletes that will be 15 and over that, maybe late starters. So you're doing a lot more teaching. But this is, like I said, just broad categories of what I'm seeing. And you're still focusing. I would say that's the thing. Like, hopefully you have the arm mechanics down. Hopefully you have, for the most part, the kicking and the appropriate rotation down. And so at this point, it is, you're making tweaks and you're fixing the breath, making sure that the breath is preserving all of those aspects. You're adding tempo and you're, I would say, focusing a lot on what I call fatigue mechanics and speed mechanics. So, yeah, if you're trying to go, a sprint backstroke, a sprint, a sprint back or sprint fly or sprint press, what are the mechanics that are you have to be focused in on? When you get tired, what are the mechanics that you have to be focused in on? So, yeah, just being, I would say a lot more race specific, but in general, this 14 under range is everything for technique. And so now for the rest of this, I'm going to go into just some highlights of specific strokes. We're going to start with freestyle. And what you'll see is, so for each stroke, I actually have a full hour presentation on what my interpretation of development mechanics and end goal mechanics, and what I think basically should be the focus for, your 14 under, and then what your focus should be in 11 and up. So obviously this 11 to 14 range being the middle ground where you're doing development, but also, starting to focus on everything. So, um, but yeah, so I have a full hour talk on every single stroke. And so obviously we're just getting the highlights. I'm not covering everything. There's going to be a big video here, but yeah, from freestyle development priorities, my yeah, as we've already kind of covered it, kicking, appropriate rotation, catch, and recovery. I want to see a full range of motion and kicking. I'm going to cover this in more detail. I'm not going to cover everything in great detail, but just try to pick one or two things out of my full hour long for each stroke. Appropriate rotation with an awareness of what full rotation looks like. And then, yeah, having a great catch. So the elbow bent and wide of the shoulder, the elbow is bent and the elbow is wide of the shoulder, and the hand and forearm are angled inward. So, if you've heard me give talks before, it's this power triangle position, not the hand and forearm angled downward and vertical. It's inward with the elbow pointed outward. And yeah, then the recovery, obviously we are all talking about recovery and freestyle. That's what everyone sees. And the arm swing wide into the side of the body. Um, yeah, when I'm watching 11, 12-year-old groups from different clubs, this is what I'm hoping to see. I'm hoping to see recoveries that are swinging wide. And if I see elbows that are too narrow and too forced up high, at 11, 12, I would say, yeah, there needs to be something addressed. And so, yeah, just a note on breathing, as I mentioned, that, yeah, turning the head minimally and quickly is extremely difficult for a little kid. And that results in drastic over rotation, deterioration of all the priorities, as I mentioned before. So, yeah, let's look at this end model technique. Uh, and so, yeah, this is kind of what, like, all the focus points that I have for freestyle. And yeah, I'm not talking about all of this, especially in such specific detail with little kids. And yes, again, starting with an appropriate amount of rotation, which, if you've heard me talk, something I've taken from a great age group coach in Virginia Beach, Kat Leach, Tide, and yeah, talking about front pockets. So if you're wearing pants while you're swimming, you have pockets on your pants, you're rotating those front pockets down, and that's it. You're not rotating your entire hip down. just rotating your front pockets down. So yeah, proper hand entries and extension in front of the shoulder, having that catch and that power triangle, but then also aligning your bicep with the upper body. Um, you know, if you hear me give, I know I'm going through this so fast, but if you hear me give, whether it's the full hour long development freestyle technique, freestyle talk, or kind of the most recent talk that I've given at World ASCA World Clinic on freestyle, you'll hear me talk about all these things in more detail. But yeah, talking more about the inward part of the stroke at the end of the stroke, the finish, uh, kind of that second half of the stroke, moving into the finish and recovery, and then talking about the breath in more detail. But yeah, these are the end points. So we're gonna get into a little bit of video. I know this, depending on my Wi-Fi connection and your Wi-Fi connection, this isn't always going to play very smoothly. And so, I apologize if that is the case. But yeah, just taking a look, I'm obviously seeing these awesome. Well, this to me is awesome. This is the fastest man in the world, the fastest person in the world, and the gold medalist in the 50 freestyle at the Olympics and World Championships. And it's great hand entries, great extensions in front of the shoulder. And I will try to pause it at different points so that, yeah, just everyone, in case the video is choppy. So yeah, great extension in front of the shoulder, getting into power triangles where the elbow is bent. You see the elbow bent out to the side and the hand is pulling under the shoulder and basically tracing the side of the body right here. And then the appropriate amount of rotation, not, basically going from front pocket to front pocket, from thigh to thigh, and not going all the way from one hip to the other. This is Ariarne Titmus, Olympic gold medalist in uh, mid-distance freestyle events too, and world record holder. And the same thing, like great entry and extension positions, appropriate rotation. The elbow is bent, and you see different degrees of this. Her hand is a little bit more bent inward, or her form is a little bit more vertical. And as I would generally like to see a little bit more down, a little bit more inward rather than just vertical. And you could see hopefully the difference there. But then, yeah, just also the same appropriate amount of rotation. And then, yeah, when I first cut this clip and then send it to my buddies, people would say, well, what do you think about that her hand going inward at the end? And I actually really love that. And seeing how it connects to the inward movement of that hand is in conjunction with the opposite hand entry and rotating to the opposite side. Again, that's a nuance that I would say is for your older athletes and not for your 10-unders. And thinking about that connection across your body. I'm never going to talk about connection. I mean, probably wouldn't talk about that connection and trying to feel that across your body when when little kids don't even have a core to be able to do that. So just two very basic drills that I think are foundational to what I'm doing in development. And yeah, it's short dog, or catch, freestyle catch, or catch skull. It's not really a skull because it's really just isolating this position. It is pretty flat. The rotation is pretty flat, and that's really where it starts from, is a an appropriate amount of rotation. Your shoulders are staying to the side of your face. Your elbows are popping out wide, and your hands and forearms are angled inward as you're moving through that. And so, yeah, you can go one arm at a time. You can go, alternating and different speeds. But yeah, I think the flatness is a big part of it. And then you can progress to long dog, which is, yeah, just obviously as you're pulling all the way through, you're going to have a little bit more rotation, but still trying to keep the rotation appropriate. You're not letting your shoulder roll in front of your face. This is appropriate rotation, where, like I said, you might want to talk with your little kids or have your little kids over exaggerate certain points, but I think making it clear that you're over exaggerating when you're rotating all the way to your hips, and rotating all the way onto your side. And so, yeah, just some different views and still maintaining the power triangle with the elbow popped out to the side and the hand in front of the shoulder. And basically, you're pulling, facing along the side of your body. Like I said, I wanted to isolate basically two aspects of every stroke, and pull out those two aspects. So, yeah, looking at freestyle kicking. And this is basically for everybody, for, focus points on developing athletes, but on also your end model, your end game technique. Uh, all athletes, rather than talking about kicking as something we get better by just repetition. So these are the cues that I would be using. So you're flinging water, you're throwing water off your toes are finishing deep. The kick starts with the knees coming forward. You bring your knees and thighs forward, and then that is how the kick is starting. I want to see a knee bend. And then you're completing the kick before setting up the next kick. So you're finishing your foot all the way down before setting up the next kick, and you're keeping the feet in the water mostly. And yeah, like I think we all see with our club athletes that, big splash sometimes good, but big splash also sometimes doesn't move anywhere. Uh, the movement, the propulsion has to be generated from in the water, under the water. So yeah, we can have big splash, and that should just really be generated by part of the foot leaving the water. The goal shouldn't be for the whole feet to leave the water and for this giant, giant splash. So um, yeah, just generally keeping the foot mostly in the water. And then, like I said, I'm going to pause some of these clips. And so you see the full extension here and how deep the foot is. It is well below the surface with an awesome kick. So these are all, um, yeah, I would say high level. They're all US Olympians, and this is when they were on the junior team. And so, with that, yeah, just they're at elite level club athletes at this point. They're all 18 under, and their kicking is awesome. They're elite kickers, not just elite swimmers. And just seeing the knee bend that starts the kick, again, the knees and thighs coming forward. And then the key is to a great kick mechanics is kick finishes all the way down. So the foot is finishing all the way down before lifting the knee up, lifting the leg up for the next kick. So every group always has great kickers and not so good kickers. I love taking video of both ends of it whenever I visit a team because 99.9% of the time, your not so good kickers are not, your good kickers are looking like this. Your not so good kickers, they are bending the knee to set up the kick. And then from this point, the knee is lifting up and the foot never gets that deep. And these athletes are obviously the feet are finishing deep. So what does it look like? Not so good kicking. So it's gonna be hard to recognize. I mean, your youngest little kids, they're very easy to recognize. Everyone will call it bent kicking from the knees. That's not really quite an accurate description. What it is your foot is kind of sliding along the surface rather than pushing water down. And so, like this athlete is more often what you'll see the knee bend set up the kick. But then if you watch where the knee is at this point, from this point forward, the knee is coming up so much as the foot is coming down. And that's really most of the time what you're going to see. You're going to see this knee bend to set up the kick. Everyone has that. All the good kickers have this. And then, yeah, the knee is coming up and lifting as the foot is coming down. Whereas you want to keep that knee forward as much as possible to get as that leg is extending. And so I hope this makes sense. I do go over this in greater detail in some other presentations. And yeah, but you hopefully you can recognize and see that the knee is coming up from this point as the foot is coming down and compared to some of the other athletes that I showed previously. But yeah, I'm gonna move on to other strokes. As I mentioned, if you do have questions and you want them answered, I will do my best. Hopefully I'll leave some time, but at this point I already see that I'm almost halfway through the time and I've only gone through one stroke. So yeah, if you write your question in the chat and then put your email in there, then I'll do my best to get back to you after the presentation. But we'll move on to backstroke. And yeah, I would say backstroke development priorities. And yeah, it's also appropriate rotation while kicking, and it is also the catch. I would say those are the two positions that I think are most important is yeah, keeping the hand shallow into the side of the body and the elbow is deeper than the hand. You're bending the elbow and the elbow is deeper than the hand. Just like when I talk about in freestyle, you're bending the elbow is out to the side in order to get that catch position that we so very much covet and know what it looks like. The understanding where the elbow is relation to the hand is important. So I don't mind the hand being so shallow. And so, maybe an inch or two under the surface. If you're thinking of lane line buoys, just under the lane line buoys is appropriate. And then the elbow is deeper than that. And a concession that I would make with body position with little kids is arching the back to like basically force the chest up is okay because kids don't have great core or much core at all. But understanding that this is not the end goal technique and the end goal of body position. So ultimately, yeah, like I said, this idea of like arching the back, forcing the hips up, pushing the chest up is, I would say, okay for your 10 unders. But as athletes are developing core, you want to change the posture. And I mentioned that in the fourth bullet point down. I want to see a boat-shaped body posture with the head slightly tilted. And so this is what I'm talking about with alignment. One example of alignment across your staff where you might be teaching something with little kids and again, like I don't expect little kids to have this boat-shaped body posture where they're curved forward and they're kind of in this sit-up position because they have no musculature, no core to be able to perform, this static, kind of crunch position. And but and as you're moving from 11, 12, 13, 14s and kids are developing their core, yeah, keep moving into this more rounded posture is where the end goal doing technique is. So yeah, you're looking for a sharp and immediate catch to the side of the body. I want to see the pull shallow and finish deep to drive the rotation. I'm going to cover this more in detail, but yeah, with little kids, I'm th thinking more just let's focus on the catch. Let's keep the hand shallow. Let's pull all the way through. And then as they get older and more developed, thinking about, yeah, the catch is hard enough to get on its own, let alone a shallow catch and a deep finish. So let's just for little kids keep the stroke a little bit more shallow. And with that, you're rotating only at the entry and finish of the stroke. So the timing of the rotation, the speed of the rotation is something that yeah, I would say is goes along with the body posture and your core development and is something that happens as you're moving forward through development physically. So looking at catch positions, these are um oh, it's actually just Kaylee McCune from a clip from the Paris Olympics. And yeah, you could see that her right hand especially, is just the wrist is curling to the side, the elbow's bending. Just doing a really nice job keeping the hands pretty shallow through the pull and pulling straight back, and then finishing a little bit deeper. You could get a little bit better sense of the depth of the finish with the left hand. Oops, let me see if I can do a better job where I'm pausing this right here. Just seeing the depth of the finish right there, and where that hand is finishing well deeper than the hip and the surface. But generally, yeah, that's not what I'm focusing on with younger athletes. Just moving through again, just the focus point for younger athletes being a more shallow and immediate touch. And, I mentioned the hand and the fingers curling around to the side and the fingers pointing towards the side. The thumb is up, the elbow is deeper, and it's a little bit harder to see the depth of the elbow here. But yeah, drills that I'm moving through to really develop this. And this is, yeah, again, more universal is starting from an appropriate rotation, similar to freestyle, where the shoulders to the side of the face, the shoulders not rolled in front of the face, and and then just moving through the catch position. I wouldn't do this for very long stretches of time at once, just because I don't think an athlete is actually feeling much with their hands and their forearms in terms of pressure on the water in this. So I would mix in different movements with this. So, here I have just dialing in. This is really just a position drill. You're not going to go very fast. You're practicing getting into position. Again, elbows deeper, but then I would mix in, some catch, and pull. So where you are feeling kind of the full effect against the arm and the athlete is getting a little bit more feedback from through their arm. And so yeah, just an appropriate rotation, catch, pull, pulling through to an appropriate rotation as you're moving through that. And then, yeah, as I said, would talk a little bit more about finish. And so, yeah, with younger athletes, I'm talking a little bit more on catching shallow and finishing shallow, basically pulling straight through. As just developing that catch is so difficult and yet so important. So I wouldn't want to, dilute that with, trying to move on to this full movement when they don't even have the catch dialed in. And so, yeah, basically my cues to older athletes are catching shallow, finishing deep, catching high, finishing low. And then basically you're just pulling straight through until the very end of the stroke and pushing downward and inward uh, at the end of the stroke. So your hand is wide and shallow through the catch and the mid part of the pull. And so you're going from the hand being wide and shallow to the hand being down, pushing down and closer to your body. So you're basically throwing water behind your hips. And then you're using that downward movement to rotate against it. So you're rotating away from that downward finish and then moving into the next catch, getting into a great position to get your next catch. And so, what does this actual movement look like? This is, yeah, a bunch of great American athletes and great American backstrokers, and you see just that depth of the finish. And again, like I don't expect, and I don't necessarily want to see younger athletes moving through this. Yes, it is a little bit uh goes against instincts in terms of what you're trying to achieve in terms of pushing water back moves you forward, but I'm trying to get to the next catch. Obviously, the backstroke, just like all strokes, it's a repetition of cycles. So you're trying to get to the next stroke, which will get you to the next great catch. And so yeah, and then it's how fast you can do those, that repeat that cycle. And so that finish, this downward finish movement is getting you to that next catch, which getting you to that next cycle faster. And so, yeah, drills that I might be using and this is just one drill that I would be using to try to help understand this downward finish and this movement. Yeah, it's with the hands high and shallow and wide. So shallow, wide, and to the side, going to narrow and deep. And so again, like throwing water you find in your hips is what you're trying to do, and you're driving your rotation off of that. And again, like understanding what is age appropriate and yeah, can you be talking about your finish actions with little kids? Sure. I would say yeah, just generally introducing it. But I would say yeah, the focus point being making sure that by the time they're leaving your 10 unders, that they understand where the catch, where the hand should be initially moving is the most important. And then obviously, yeah, like I said, dialing in the kick and dialing in your appropriate rotation. So, yeah, moving on to flying breaststroke, and then maybe I will have time for questions. This would be a little bit of a miracle. Um, and so, yeah, fly development priorities to me. Yeah, it's body press with kick and their pull pattern with the kick. So I do think the kick action and using that and making sure that that's there is really important at all ages. Body press with kick, so not diving the head down too much. The chin is not tucked, not tucking the chin, and the eyes tilted at an angle. So this is, I mean, forget the recovery, forget the breath. This is already hard enough to really be that specific about. I mean, yeah, just understanding how the head and body are moving, how much, the subtleties of where the eyes are looking. That's not just always straight down. And yeah, a little bit of a tilt to the head position. The chin is not tucked. Again, like we're trying to get the hips up, and you actually don't need to be diving with your head and your chest that much to get the hips up. And then the pull pattern with kick. So I like to talk about the pull as the first part of the pull. You have a giant bowl in front of you, and let's say you have to clean this large bowl. You're trying to wipe the outside of this large bowl, and so your hands are pitched backward, facing the bowl and facing you. And your hands are moving out wider and your fingers are pointing downward as you're doing that. So you're wiping the outside of the large bowl initially while pulling back, and then the hands are moving inward towards the midline. And then you're also trying to generate the kick during that. Again, just the body pressing kick and the pull pattern and having a kick is hard enough. So to me, yeah, teaching the breath, just like freestyle, is your kids, especially, they're going to race at some point and they're going to do some 25 fly. You will be doing full stroke. There will be some good breathing, but or there will be some breathing happening. I don't know if it's going to be good. And, but it's, giving concession that the breath is very difficult. It's happening in the same time that the pull is happening, as I mentioned, which I already think is a pretty complicated movement. and the breath is also happening at the same time as the second kick. So you have the kick at the entry and then kick during the pull. And so you have three things that are very difficult all happening at once. The breath itself is difficult, the pull itself is difficult, and the second kick and coordinating that with any of these movements is difficult. And so that's why I would say, like, I would give concession for the breath, and just like freestyle, I would consider snorkel use at a younger age. And, just allowing the head not to stay buried, but to stay naturally moving as you're trying to focus in on just coordinating the pull and the kick, which I think is really important. And, with the second kick, the kick that happens during the pull, there are very few elite athletes now at any age that I see doing just one kick. I can't really even think of anybody right now. Maybe one athlete that I'm aware of at the NC2A level, but that's about it. And so, yeah, having two kicks, uh, focusing in on what this looks like, how you have this pull pattern kick and body press and kick. As I'm talking about with the model, kind of the end model stroke, the goal technique, it is a flatter stroke. And, it's not a big undulating motion with the head diving down at all. The head is staying in line with the body as the body is pressing. The chest can press, but not the head, and it does require a little bit of mobility through the shoulders, but not like it doesn't require like Michael Phelps mobility level mobility, just a little bit of mobility where you're pressing through and pressing in front of the shoulders, but not diving the head with the chin tucked. Having two kicks, I like seeing the hands round out into the finish and not focusing on finishing your hands at your thighs. And then yeah, just trying to have everything the press synchronized with the arms and then understanding the breath timing. Um, let's look at this is an 11, 12-year-old with to me like really awesome, nice mechanics. Um, maybe pressing a little bit too much. But to be honest, like you might even look at this and say, wow, this girl really isn't pressing that much. I love that the head is in between the arms, that the ears are staying in between the shoulders here. The arms are extended. To me, this is a pretty flatter stroke. This doesn't have the head diving down. This is a very model technique, and really exceptional, especially for an 11, 12-year-old. You have two kicks, so you have your kick at the entry. So let's focus in on that. You have the kick as her hands are entering, the knees are bent. You see that she's kicking her hands forward. That's a cue that I'm constantly using is kicking your hands forward. So you have the knees bent and the hand and kicking your hands forward. And then you have, yeah, same thing, this entry kick. And then you have the kick with the pull. The knees are bending, and I can't click pause fast enough. But then the feet are finishing when the hands are finished. So the knees are bent, and then the kick finishes when the hands are finishing and exiting the water. And you see the pull pattern on this little picture in picture on the bottom left corner. You have the hands entering in front of the shoulders. I personally like to see the palms pitch down. Again, this is 11, 12-year-old, so I'm not saying this is perfect technique, but very, very, very good technique. So the hands are entering, extending in front of the shoulder. The hands are going wider from here, like wiping outside of a large bowl before the hands come inward underneath the body or towards the midline, which is great. And then yeah, so let's look at some drills and basic movement checks. Yeah, body dolphin with the head lead. And so yeah, this is to me teaching proper body press and enough sufficient body press. And so um, you see these athletes moving with the snorkel. I think that's great. To me, the snorkel will give pretty negative feedback if you're pressing down too deep. You get water in your snorkel, and that to me is a sign that you're pressing your head wet down too much. So doing this with the snorkel is really good. Obviously, you don't have to also disrupt this motion with lifting your head for that breath. And so, yeah, and my other cue is keeping the feet mostly in the water. So yeah, pressing the head and chest forward. It's easiest to do this with the hands at the side. And then I would progress to doing it with hands on hand above with your hands on a board, and you can press against the board. But then after that, you go into body dolphin hand lead. So again, I would start with the younger kids, and your younger kids progressing with your hands on a board and you're pressing against the board. That way you're not just bobbing your entire upper body up and down, that you're pressing through at your chin and your chest. And yeah, so it's harder to do get that press with through your shoulders, with your hands extended. And it's the same cues. It's you're not driving your head down, your eyes, your chest is bobbing slightly, your snorkel's not going underwater, and your feet are mostly staying in the water. As I'm progressing towards what it would look like with the stroke, and you heard me talk about, talking about that 11, 12-year-old. My cue that I really like is kicking your hands forward, kicking your hands into the entry, and that's what this would be. So, yeah, just you're doing your body dolphins in a Y, and then kicking your hands forward. So body dolphins in a Y, kicking your hands forward. And the Y isn't really, it's really simulate, it's just you're giving yourself an opportunity to extend forward and kick your hands forward and practice that part. That's where the Y kind of fits in. Is yeah, you're doing your body dolphins, getting your chest press, keeping your snorkel above the surface, keeping your feet mostly in the water, and then extending, kicking your hands forward into that and really getting that emphasis. You can progress from this into, yeah, kicking your hands forward into a pull, so you're getting your entry kick, your body dolphin kick, your kick into the entry, and your kick into a pull, and just staying shallow and forward. I do think that people tend to, I mean, with most fly, traditionally, everyone thinks of the movement being this big up and down undulating movement, but the head really shouldn't be diving down that much. And yeah, we'll see little kids that are 10 and unders moving a lot more with their head diving, mostly because they don't have the ability to connect their head to their body with that minimal core. So you'll see a lot more head movement with little kids. And I do think that, again, just giving grace to that, understanding that little kids don't have the core to be able to keep their whole head connected in. And so then being able to, yeah, to be a little bit more flatter, be a little bit more quiet with your head movement. And then, yeah, just more specifically with pull pattern, then we'll wrap it up with breaststroke. Yeah, with little kids, I would say, yeah, we're talking about extending, hands entering, extending in front of the shoulders. I want to see the hands round outward and wider, as I mentioned, the wiping outside of large bowl. I do think with little kids generally, I'm trying to get this first part of the stroke really dialed in more than the rest of it. I did say like pull pattern, ultimately trying to move towards the hands moving inward. I don't want to see, as you're wiping the outside of the large bowl, as your hands are moving out, as your hands are moving wider, I don't want to see the palms facing outward. And I think that's what it used to be when we would talk about the keyhole pattern shape, which you can still talk about it, but I think you need to just adjust. We need to adjust to make sure that the palms are facing mostly towards your feet as you're moving your hands, instead of, hands pushing out to the side. But then, yeah, the hands are shaping inward in the back half of the stroke towards your midline, while mostly pushing water back. Again, you're mostly pushing water back, but your hands are coming inward towards each other, and then you're rounding outward towards the finish, towards the exit of the stroke. So it is the hands moving inward to outward. So the hands are underneath the body, and then I'm going to pause it at that point where the hands are inward right here. You see the hands very close to the body right here. And then as the hands are exiting, they're sweeping outward. And yeah, when you see a good athlete, a good flyer, and their hands exiting the water, they're already moving out to the side when their hands are exiting the water. So just keeping that, I would say, yeah, the nuance to the finish is this rounded motion. And yeah, it's a little bit more nuanced than, the maybe some traditional teaching where you're focusing on the hands finishing at the thighs and then lifting and exiting out. It needs to be more round than it is kind of jagged in sharp corners and positions. So um and then just one more fly slide. And again, you see a bunch of these elite athletes where the hands are moving inward to outward. And so hopefully I will be able to pause it for you where the hands are a little bit more narrow underneath here. Obviously, this athlete in the bottom right is pretty wide before the hands are then sweeping outward. So you have the hands entering in front of the shoulders and extending in front of the shoulders. You can see where the press action is, but that the head is not pressing very deep. These are all the best flyers in the world. And then yeah, the hands swiping outward, getting wider before the hands moving inward, before the hands then swipe outward into the exit. Again, your younger athletes, I would be thinking about where the head position is mostly and trying to dial that in. And yeah, what I'm used to seeing with 910s and unders is the head's going way more forward in front of the shoulders and way deeper than that. So let's move on to breaststroke. Obviously, I'm just touching on things very lightly. Again, I see the chat is there are some things popping up in the chat. So yeah, leave your questions, and if you want, if I don't get to it, just leave your emails as well. Yeah, and then just in breaststroke development, with the pull pattern, that's kind of what I would focus on most. Obviously, we all know the difficulties and challenges in teaching breaststroke kick. And so but generally, with the pull pattern, I'm trying to make circles with the hands. So I'm talking with little kids, I'm talking circles with hands. You're going circle into a triangle in front of your body. And then the last part of the circle, where your hands are driving forward, you're striking forward, and that's the fastest part of the circle. So you're going circle to triangle in front of your body, with the elbows out to the side, the hands are together, the elbows are out to the side, and then the last part is the fast part. Your strike forward is the fast part of the circle. I generally want to see kids staying leaning forward, not coming up vertically. Um, I think there's a perception that the elite athletes like a Adam Peaty, like a Lily King are coming up very vertical. But really, like there is always some forward leaning aspect to it. So they're not coming up totally straight up, even though I think it makes the coolest pictures. That's what people see. But that's not what people should be trying to mimic and replicate. And then the kick is kind of, I would say, the biggest opportunity for us to learn and explore. I would personally would like to see a kick that is more direct and straight back and less emphasis on wide and around, therefore less emphasis on squeezing the finish, and then less emphasis on finishing folks and closing the kick. So this is where everyone gets their pitchforks out and starts rioting against me. But um, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, generally my breaststroke technique models. This was, kind of where I'm going forward for yeah, all your athletes, your senior athletes, your trying to aim for yeah, trying to minimize the stop and go, keeping the hands and body accelerating forward, keeping the hips high. I would say, yeah, maybe little kids might not be able to have that imagery and have that awareness, but yeah, I want to try to keep the hips high and use that by kicking a little bit low and finishing the feet lower. Um, yeah, and then yeah, working on tempo and keeping timing when you're moving through tempo. So let's take a look at the pull. As I mentioned, I want to see circles. I don't want to see squares. I don't want to see sharp edges. I want to see the hands moving in a very round pattern. I don't want to see, um, you know, out, back, and in and sharp corners. I want to see the hands moving in a very round movement. And then I want to see a triangle of space. And so I pause the next clip at a few different points. And so the triangle of space is right here. So, where the elbows are out to the side and the elbows are not squeezing in front of the body. And then you have the hands together. So, you have your circles, your hands moving around and around, out and around into this triangle of space where the elbows are out wide. And then the hands are together and you're leaving this space, and that space is where your head and body, head and chest can drive into. And then, yeah, this being a little bit more full speed, it's not full speed, but it's closer to full speed, where you could see just the emphasis on the body driving forward and that striking forward. You're driving into the line. You're not just establishing your line, but you're striking forward into that line very actively. And so, yeah, it's the movement of the hands. Again, that last part of the stroke is the fastest part of the stroke. Um, before I started talking about breaststroke and maybe breaststroke kick specifically, the chat was at like 11 responses and now they're 25. So I can't wait to see what everyone's saying. But then yeah, let's talk a little bit more specifically about breaststroke kick and then we'll wrap it up. And so yeah, to me, with younger athletes, what I'd like for people to try and what I've been trying to emphasize more is yeah, the knees coming forward and the heels coming up, doing that both quickly. So yeah, bringing up the knees forward and the heels forward quickly, and um and then the leg extending and pushing back. And it's not just straight back, obviously, but there is a little some roundness to that movement. I would say it's like the shape of a U as we're moving, as you're kicking. If your feet are making the shape of a letter U versus a big O. If you can think about the subtle difference between that. And then the feet are deep and wide at the full extension. This is kind of what I'm thinking about with model technique. The feet are deep and wide when the legs are fully extended. Basically, the hips are up and high, and the feet are rounding up together towards the surface. So when your legs are fully extended, they're actually not together yet until they reach the surface. So we'll take a look at this. To me, there are so many mistakes that happen with a very wide kick. I see with people have a very wide kick where the feet stay at the surface. That's when your athletes are mostly diving down. That to me is also when timing gets thrown off because your wide kickers, their kick speed can't keep up with their hand speed, so their timing's off. And yeah, with your feet staying high and shallow, your hands are diving down because their only mechanics to keep the hips up is hands diving down. And so this is what I very often see, and I would say kind of don't want to see is these big wide kicks where the feet are still so wide and shallow as they're moving. And this second girl is probably the best one. But then yeah, what's interesting, yeah, all these the timing of the kick, the start of the kick is actually pretty good when they're bringing their knees up, and when they start bringing their feet back is actually good too. But the width of the kick, the wideness of the kick makes it so that the timing doesn't can't really work out. So their feet are wide, they're squeezing their kick. This to me is pretty traditional. And this to me is yeah, an elite kicker. And I think there's a slow motion version of this. But if not, then I'll pause it at the points. But basically I would focus in on yeah, this bottom view, and you could see where the feet are at this point, how far they are from the surface. I'll pause it again on that side view, and you get to see it a little bit more. But yeah, knees and heels up. The feet, yes, they're rounding around, but then giving permission for an athlete's feet to leave the surface is what I giving an allowance for the athlete's feet to leave the surface. This is an elite senior athlete in the US. And let me try to pause this. Okay, here we go. So pause at the heels up. And then, oh yeah, yeah. So bad at pausing this. I should have had a very slow motion kick. So pausing it down, but actually the next slide would really show it. But you could see the depth of the feet, the height of the hips, and yeah, the arms are flattened forward too. They're not diving down at this point. The feet are low, so the hands are high. And so yeah, these are elite athletes, and it is slow motion through this kick. I should have just gone to this clip in the first place. And yeah, you see these athletes as they're extending down, and their hips are high. And this to me is all elite breaststrokers, all of the best breaststrokers at most levels. Especially I would say your top US national level and then your top international athletes are all looking like this with their kick. I think the goal, as with all technique, is how do we teach more people to be like this? And I think it starts with the fundamentals of, yeah, how we're moving the feet around. And yeah, I don't have all the answers to this one. I just know what we should be trying to aim for. And I would say I would want us to explore as a community what that looks like in the teaching progression and where that should be going. Here's a few ideas of kind of where I've gone to with teaching breaststroke kick is yeah, trying to get to a deep Y, or I would say maybe like I said, a deep U shape with the feet, not a deep O, where yeah, there's your feet are rounding, kind of rounding around and back. Your hips are coming up as they're moving through that. And so I actually want this kid to be pausing in this Y position and I think the third kick maybe does a good job. No, he's obviously in an endless pool, so the water's constantly moving. But yeah, pausing there as his hips come up is kind of what I want to see with the feet down and wide. These athletes are, yeah, focusing on kicking down and their hips up as they're moving through this, just in a body position kick, with a snorkel and then kicking the hips up. This athlete is doing against a wall, which I think can just be a little bit easier, and you could feel that kind of kicking the hips higher and kicking the body a little bit higher. And then the classic drill of breaststroke pull and dolphin kick, I think is a really good one too. But the focus, what most people do instinctively with breaststroke pull and dolphin kick is dive the hands down, and that's what drives the hips up. I want to see the feet finish low, and that will keep the low feet, the deep feet finishing the hips up and driving the hands forward instead of driving in the head and the hands downward to get the hips up the surface. So thinking about how you move through dolphin kick, breaststroke pull, dolphin kick is really important, and maybe that deserves some reevaluation in how your athletes are moving through breaststroke pull and dolphin kick right now. And then you can do two dolphin kicks and a breaststroke kick. And again, this idea of feet down, hands forward, moving through your dolphin kicks and moving through your breaststroke kick. Feet down, hands forward, hips up, hands forward instead of hands down. And yeah, that's kind of where I'll wrap it up. We revisit this slide again. The slides will be available. You should actually, I think, Ariel Hodges from ASCA does so much of our behind the scenes work. She's talked about putting this on the front page of the website. So just check back. You'll also get a follow-up email after this, since you registered, and it'll link to the recording probably, I think, typically is what happens. And then it'll also link to the slides and where you can find this. So yeah, just an understanding of this. Like I said, this webinar was open to non-members. So welcome to non-members and all ASCA members. If you're looking for the video, the slides won't have it because it's a PDF. But if you're looking for many of the videos, you should check out, this is gated to membership. So with your ASCA membership, you can log on to the ASCA Video Technique Library, and there are most of the videos that you saw here, and you'll be able to click on it and access it in an awesome way. Also gated to your ASCA membership, the ASCA Performance Data Library, which is all things that I've curated in terms of data and collected. So that includes, I call them blueprints for all of your long course and short course races. So looking at it by 50, your kick counts, your throw counts, and your tempo. Looking at short course races too. So looking at from short course yards by 25, your kick counts, cycles, and tempo. And then other things like dolphin kick counts, I have breathing patterns in there too. So things that you should check out. Again, if you're not an ASCA member, welcome, and I hope you consider joining. And obviously you get access to the archive of the ASCA live talks. You could see the recording of this one, which I think will be available for free for anyone to view for a while. But then after a while, after a limited time, the only way you'd be able to view the recording is through your membership, and you can view all of the previous ASCA lives in addition to everything that I mentioned. And for the next 10 days, you'll be able to get 10% off using the code Coach Appreciation. And so hope you have the opportunity to do that. I see that the chat is loaded up, and I'm excited about that. We will have all of these things saved. Again, if you had a question here and you didn't have your email in here and you would like me to get back to it, please put your email in the chat. And that would actually help me respond to you directly. Obviously, we're at noon, and I mean, I would so much rather be here answering questions than my dentist appointment in 30 minutes. But I do have a dentist appointment in 30 minutes. Um, but I'm excited to look through what the chat is. And obviously, I'm like so tempted to get started with this, but I know once I get started, it'll just keep rolling through. And I will not be able to stop. But I'm excited and appreciate everyone for being here, and hope this was worth your time, and thank you so much for your time. Ariel, I don't know if I saw you put your video on, if you have something that you want to close with.
Yeah, very quickly. Thanks everybody that was here. We appreciate your time. ASCA members, as always, you will get the credits for coming to today's webinar within the next hour. If you do not, send me an email at education@swimmingcoach.org. We do have another ASCA Live here in October. It's taking the helm, what it really means to own a team, and that's going to be with Chad Onken from Quest Swimming. And then for those of you that are not members, in honor of Coach Appreciation or Thank You Coach Month, we're teaming up with USA Swimming for that. We are also going to have another webinar open for you in November, and that is going to be Ask a Live with Jim Richardson, color coded coaching, making your band check system work for you. So make sure you mark that on your calendar. Very similar to what we did today. We will send out a link so that you and your coaches that are not members can sign up. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today. We will get everything out to you hopefully by the end of the week, and let us know if you have other questions. See you all next time.
Thank you. Have a good day.